When I was reincarnated, I tried to avoid all encounters with Willow-like Yen. She was transferred to the south. I applied to Northwestern University. She bought a house in preparation for getting married in the south. I decided to settle in the north. Just because in her previous life, her white moonlight spent his whole life alone because of her, because he felt indebted to him. She secretly adopted a child with him. Even my son and Yen were touched by their touching love and became family with them. After getting my marriage certificate back, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. No one knew that I was reincarnated. Right at the last moment before submitting the marriage certificate, I was able to run over and use the excuse that my family information was written incorrectly to get that paper back. The secretary was very surprised. "You guys submitted the papers in the morning and came back in the afternoon to take them back. Is it because you don't want to get married anymore?" I didn't want to cause any more trouble, so I just shook my head and said the information I filled in was wrong. I would correct it and bring it back later. The secretary now breathed a sigh of relief. "Tell me to bring it in soon after fixing it to submit it." I nodded and went out, then threw the marriage certificate directly into the trash. In this life, Lu and Yen can no longer get married. In her previous life, even though she had submitted her marriage certificate, her attitude towards me became increasingly cold. I thought it was just her personality, so I didn't pay much attention. Unexpectedly, when I was near the end of the world, I realized that by her side there was always a person named Don Tan, her Bok Noyet Kwong. Because of her, he never got married his whole life. Finally, at the age of 40, she was moved by Don Tan and adopted a son with him. After that, even my daughter was moved by their pure love, secretly interacting with them behind my back. If it weren't for the last moments of her life, my daughter accidentally said that her mother and Uncle Don were finally complete, I would still be kept in the dark. Only then did I realize. It turns out I was just a joke my whole life. It turns out that Liu's coldness like Yen's and the time she was transferred had a reason. Not for anything else, just for Don Tan. Every time she transferred, it was to places far away from me. 60 years of marriage, the time I have actually lived together and as Yen is afraid, is less than a year. But on the contrary, wherever she went, Don Tan followed her. Don Tan even later became her personal doctor. With Don Tan's love and silent companionship, she felt indebted, so she agreed to adopt a child with Don Tan and also tacitly agreed to let Don Tan's child call her mother. Even my daughter hopes that I will die soon so that I can become that fateful couple. Coming home, I looked at the old house with a complicated feeling. In my previous life, exactly 1 month later, Lu Yan and I would have our wedding here. After getting married, she was transferred to the south to work. I wanted to follow her, but she said the conditions there were too harsh and advised me to stay. After that, I lived here for 30 years without even knowing it. Less than half a year after she was transferred to the south, the person named Don Tan followed. From then on, the two began to be entangled for life, from the ends of the earth to the ends of the earth. Funny thing is, I was worried that Lu like Yen would be alone in a faraway place with no one to take care of me, so I wanted to go with her, but every time she refused. And just like that, on the outside she has a sense of understanding, and for her whole life I have never left this land. When she got home, Lu like Yen still hadn't returned. I went into my room, opened the bottom drawer of the closet, and found my acceptance letter. In his previous life, because after getting married, Lu like Yen was transferred to the south, and his mother-in-law fainted for no reason. A month later, needing someone to take care of me at home, I gave up the opportunity to study at Northwestern. This has always been my biggest regret in my previous life. I caressed the notification letter, looking at my name and the university's bright red letters on it. I almost burst into tears. I remember my previous life, when I was far from heaven. Don and my daughter came to visit. It was as if I knew I didn't have much longer to live. Don kept coming every day. But when no one is around, he shows his true face. The words he said cut straight into my heart. What if he takes the husband's position? All her life, the person who stayed by Liu's side like Yen was always me. And he was just a free nanny to help her take care of the elderly and children. I also have to thank you for raising me a good daughter. Don kept talking like that. Sadly, I didn't even have the strength to scold him. He also had to open his eyes and watch his own daughter treat him like her own father. Even when I was about to take my last breath, my daughter breathed a sigh of relief and said the last sentence, "Uncle Don is also satisfied." I carefully kept the notification letter. The past cannot be undone. While cooking dinner, Lu like Yen returned with a tired look. Seeing her wet body, I suddenly remembered my past life. This day, because I knew Lu like Yen had submitted her marriage certificate, I bought a lot of food to wait for her to come home to celebrate. It was very late when she returned. When she returned, she was also soaked. At that time, I worriedly asked what happened, but Lu like Yen was just cold and said nothing. Later I found out, it turned out that Don fell into the river for some reason. Lu like Yen saved him. I smiled faintly thinking about things. In my previous life, I guessed it. Perhaps Don knew that Lu and Yen submitted the marriage certificate, so he was desperate to force death. This also explains why in the past life, today, Lu like Yen is so cold towards me. Perhaps she blamed me for Don jumping into the river, but what was my fault? The person who said she wanted to get married was her, the person who submitted the marriage certificate was also her, the person who promised to be with me forever was also her. Yet in the end, I became the one who sabotaged the couple. So, when I saw Lu like Yen come back soaking wet again, I just turned my eyes away, unlike my previous life, rushing to make water to take care of her, but calmly continued to stir-fry my dish. Lu like Yen didn't have hot water to bathe in, so she just quietly changed her wet clothes. While eating, she sneezed continuously. I just acted like I didn't hear it. After dinner, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, I saw Lu like Yen restlessly pacing back and forth in the living room. Finally, she couldn't bear it anymore, took her coat, said, "I'm going out for a moment," and then hurriedly left. I pursed my lips, dotting the string and writing a line on the old, yellowed poster on the wall. Just write the 2 words "Maine," and I'll leave. Lu like Yen didn't return until nearly morning. I heard her deliberately light footsteps from the next room, but just pretended not to know. The next morning, I think Lu and Yen went to work. I was preparing to buy train tickets when I heard coughing coming from her room. My hand holding the rice bowl stopped, but I still pretended not to hear. After eating, I planned to go out to buy train tickets. Train tickets at this time are very difficult to buy, just lining up takes a lot of time. But this train ticket is really important to me. I have to buy early to have peace of mind. As I was about to go out, I heard a knock on the door outside. I feel strange. Opening the door, I saw young Don with a pale face standing outside the door. He took a quick glance at me, then bowed his head uneasily and said in a low voice, "Phuong Nguyen, I'm looking for Lu like Yen." From his appearance, anyone looking at him would think that he and Lu, like Yen, were impure. But I don't have time to act with him now. I didn't close the door, just walked directly past him and went downstairs. When I got there, I brought rice and rode my bike out. Based on memory, I also asked a few more people along the way. It was nearly 10 o'clock when I reached the station. Currently, there are a lot of people going back and forth at the station. The line of people lining up to buy tickets was also long. I chose a line with fewer people to line up. At noon, when the staff was about to leave, it was my turn. It's just that when it was my turn, the tickets to go where I needed were sold out. Seating, I did not hesitate to buy the earliest standing ticket. After buying the ticket, I carefully hid the train ticket on my person and quickly cycled back. I was originally worried that I would see a miserable couple confiding in each other, but as soon as I opened the door, I saw Lu Like-yen sitting in the living room. Her room door seemed to open on purpose, seeing me coming home. Lu Nuyen moved her lips as if she wanted to say something, but I just turned my head to the kitchen. I'm hungry now, so let's make dinner. While eating, I felt that Lu and Yen always seemed to want to explain something, but I didn't say anything and she had to hold back. Finally, she couldn't help but look up at me. Fuang Nguyen, she said. Just now I was thinly eating the rice in the bowl and calmly said, "Don't talk when you eat." Hearing that, Lu Nuyen's throat choked and she swallowed back what she was about to say. I laughed coldly in my heart. Before, when we were together, I always started talking. But after she confronted the topic I intentionally brought up, she was always indifferent, didn't react or just said not to talk while eating. Before, I thought I didn't speak well enough, but later I realized that meeting the wrong person means even if you say something, it's a mistake. What does she want to say? In the end, I didn't care. After eating, I went back to my room to take out the wedding preparations, found a large bag, and quietly wrapped it up. My cousin is getting married at the end of the year. Just when his home conditions were not good. These things cost a lot of money anyway, it would be a shame to throw them away. I wrapped it all up, preparing to bring it to my cousin tomorrow. I put the clothes in an old sack. Lu Market Like Yen went out, I directly carried the sack to my mother's house. Seeing me come home, my mother thought that Lu and Yen were arguing, afraid that it would affect my going to college. I just had to hide this for now, saying that I recently needed to buy a lot of new clothes, and there was no place for these, so I brought them home first. My mother now breathed a sigh of relief. If my mother knew I was planning to annul my marriage to Lu Like-yen, I was afraid she would chase me and slash all 3 streets. My parents and Lu's parents Like-yen all work for the same state-owned agency. She and I seem to have known each other since childhood. But Lu, Like-yen, has been a member of a good family since childhood, studied well, has a good job, and has the most outstanding appearance. My mother really liked her. Later, when someone set me up as a matchmaker, Lu Yen's parents knew about it and immediately felt that she and I were a good match. At first, because Lu Like-yen was beautiful and had a good job, I thought she wouldn't pay attention to me. But unexpectedly, a few days later my mother returned. She happily told me that Lu Like-yen actually had feelings for me. From then on, I started contacting her. In just half a year, our relationship progressed dramatically, until a month ago, our families decided to get married. At that time, my mother said that Lu Like-yen was a good wife who even had a lantern, so it was difficult to find someone with good fortune like her. You must hold on tightly to your child, otherwise I will not forgive you. To be honest, when I was first with Lu Like-yen, I felt quite confused. I never thought she could become my wife. Sometimes I also notice her being absent-minded when facing me, but I think it's because she's busy with work. Unexpectedly, on my side, not knowing that Lu and Yen had actually been hesitant between me and Don Tan since before we got married. Maybe it was just because I was suitable, or because I was the choice that both families agreed on, so in the end she chose me. In fact, up until now, she and I only lack one marriage certificate. Previously, when I took the university entrance exam, she let me move in with her so she could take care of me. But now the registration has been taken back from me. Everything between me and her seems to have ended. Leaving home, I felt relieved, rarely in a leisurely mood, so I immediately bought an ice cream on the side of the road. I slowly walked home. When I was about to reach the door, I was attracted by the silhouettes of a man and a woman. "You're like Yen, don't force me, I can't accept it," Don Tan's voice sounded choked. Lu like Yen pushed the bicycle with one hand, while the other hand resolutely stuffed the bag of rice into his hand. "If you give it to me, you can take it. I'll just use the rice I leave behind. If you keep it, you can live for half a year like that, it's more meaningful," as the two pushed back and forth. Don Tan seemed to see me. He instinctively blocked Lu like Yen. "The two of us really have nothing. Don't misunderstand that I'm stubbornly clinging to you like Yen. If you're angry, just be angry." The man in front of me, my face was pale, but my eyes were resilient as if accepting death. Lu like Yen, who he unconsciously protected, was also looking at me with a pale face. I coldly walked past them, not bothering to take another look. It's really unlucky to encounter people on the road who you don't want to see. Arriving home, not long after, Lu like Yen also opened the door and walked in. Seeing me, her cold face finally had a different expression. "Fuang Nguyen, please listen to my explanation." I calmly looked at her. "Okay, tell me." Actually, no matter what she said, I didn't care, but seeing that I wasn't angry and could still communicate, she breathed a sigh of relief. "I know you won't think nonsense." Hearing that, I laughed coldly in my heart. She seemed to arrange her words before speaking sincerely. "Things are not as they seem." I looked at her coldly, not saying anything to hear her continue. "Once I was injured on the road and went to the hospital to meet him. He helped me bandage and then took me to the hospital." She looked at me carefully for a moment, then continued. "The next time I went to the hospital to change bandages, I ran into him again. I heard he was in trouble, so I thought I should help him a little. Too many coincidences can only be intentional. I don't think Lu like Yen, an adult, doesn't understand that, just pretending to be stupid." "So, is the rice used to buy things for the wedding still not worth it compared to giving it to him to spend?" Even though I no longer cared, I still couldn't help but tease her. Lu and Yen's face changed, a bit confused. "I didn't mean that." She clearly knew in her heart whether she meant it or not, but to me, it made no difference. I thought for a moment and then said sincerely, "Actually, have you thought about whether we could annul our marriage?" At this point, I couldn't help but say it. Because if she was the one who proposed to annul the marriage, at least my mother wouldn't cry and make a fuss or make random threats. Moreover, in her previous life, as soon as she submitted her marriage certificate, she gradually became cold towards me, perhaps because of regret. If the marriage can be annulled now, it will be a good thing for both me and her. But unexpectedly, Lu Nuyen frowned after hearing this. "Is marriage a game? How can you say that not being married means not being married? I am a woman. What do you want people to think about you? Your thinking is not correct." Okay. I understand." I raised my hands in surrender, really not wanting to get involved with her any further. After that, he immediately returned to his room. The time spent listening to her lectures is better spent quietly thinking about which stocks to buy so that you can earn money in your pockets and bowls. As for money, I had to take the money my parents gave me for temporary use. Because my parents are very satisfied with Lu as Yen. So this time when we got married, they almost used up all their savings. All my life I opened the box, took out the money, carefully wrapped it in a towel and returned it. It can't be considered my startup capital. When my mother makes a fuss, I will show her the money. I think, because of that money, she probably won't be angry for too long. The next morning, the first thing I did was add a stroke to the old poster. Only 8 more days until I can leave here. What are you writing? A low voice suddenly rang out from behind me. Startled, I turned around and saw Lu Laikyan standing there. She looked at me curiously. What did you write on the poster? At this moment, she stood very close to me. Her breath blowing into my ear made me take a quick step back. It was disgusting. After that, I wanted to lie and get it over with, but seeing her still staring at the poster, I had to make up an excuse. I'm counting how many days it's been since you submitted the marriage certificate. I don't know why, what I said seemed to make her happy. The doubt and slight insecurity on her face suddenly disappeared. She breathed a sigh of relief, letting go of the hand she was hiding behind her back. In his hand was a square velvet box. Open it and see. Lu Nuyen looked at me expectantly. It's strange, in my previous life, she and I were married for 50 years, raised our daughter together, and said goodbye to 4 parents, but she never gave me any gifts. My eyes fell on the velvet box, suddenly feeling a bit ironic. What's wrong with you? Please open it and see. Lu Laikyan urged again. I took a deep breath and pushed the box back to her. You keep it. Wait for the marriage certificate to be approved before giving it to me, I said calmly. Just that registration certificate, it is impossible to get it in this life. The corner of my mouth curled up slightly. Lu Laikyan looked at the box in her hand and sighed. Okay, that's it. I'll put it away first, wait until the day the marriage certificate is approved and then give it to you. I have to say, I can see that Lu and Yan are clearly a bit disappointed. She was looking forward to giving this gift, but the other person didn't bother to look at it. It's actually a bit hurtful, but so what? Compared to the concealment and hurt she caused me in my previous life, this is nothing. After breakfast, Lu Laikyan prepared to go out. Before leaving, she said she would come home early in the evening to go see a movie with me. I didn't say yes or no, I just watched her leave the house. After Lu Laikyan left, I took the things I packed yesterday out of the room and left a note on the living room table, saying I would come to his house for a few days. When I take the bus to the next town, is it close? You don't know I'm coming. Seeing me walking and carrying a large package, they quickly put down their bowls and chopsticks and came out to greet me. When my grandmother saw me, she was happy and hugged me. Honestly, meeting my grandmother who passed away early in my previous life made me extremely happy. My grandmother only had 2 children, so she always favored me over her other cousins. This time when I returned, I not only brought wedding preparations, but also brought many nutritious items for my grandmother. After chatting for a while, my uncle secretly caught a chicken to eat. I knew I couldn't stop her, so I followed her. When I saw how many things I was carrying, I thought I had run away, but when I opened the package, she saw the things inside and was speechless. I smiled and said to everyone who was surprised, "This is what your mother told you to bring home. If you want to thank me, please thank my mother." Anyway, I was prepared to face my mother's anger when I returned. If you owe a lot, don't be afraid of being a burden, I told myself guiltily. Hearing that my mother told me to bring it home, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. But my aunt is still a little uneasy, mainly because these items are too many. But grandmother is very calm. I just saw her waving her arms. It's nothing. When my niece gets married, I can't give these few things away. Put it away, put it away. I live very comfortably at my grandmother's house. In the evening, my cousin and I sat in the room listening to her gossip. During the day, I wait for my grandmother to cook me delicious dishes. The uncle and aunt do not have a stable job. My aunt sold baked potatoes at the factory gate, and my uncle mainly did odd jobs. That day, I helped my aunt sell potatoes on the street and saw a stall selling hairpins. Haircut next to. The business was doing quite well, so I asked her why not try selling a few more similar things. Unexpectedly, she just shook her head, saying that there was no source of goods, and moreover, the capital to import goods would probably require a lot of money, and she also had to worry about being pressured by others, so she didn't dare. I thought for a bit and then silently remembered this. In my previous life, my uncle and aunt lived very hard lives and their hair turned gray early because of worries, but they always treated me very well. This time when I return, if I can, I will definitely help them escape poverty. Even becoming a well-off household in the future is not impossible. Knowing her point of view, I began to unintentionally and intentionally remind her in front of her how profitable the sale was. Gradually, as she listened to me every day, she began to unconsciously observe the surrounding stalls. Gradually, she also asked me if selling goods really earned more than selling potatoes. I know you have an idea. Now just wait for the opportunity. If she can find a source of goods, I think she will no longer hesitate to set up a stall. I returned from my grandmother's house after a week. This time I intentionally stayed at my grandmother's house for a week. After all, when I go away to school, seeing them again won't be as easy as before. During those days, I often went to the stall next door to buy things, and even cleverly asked the owner for the source of the goods. After that, I went with my aunt and cousin to get a batch of goods to test sell for 2 days. At this point, I can safely return. After putting away all the things I brought home from my grandmother's house, I lay down on the bed. When I woke up, it was dark. As soon as I stepped out of the room, I smelled the delicious smell of food. I was about to speak up, but I saw 2 people in the kitchen chatting and laughing. I leaned against the door and leisurely looked at them. When Don Ton carried a plate of food out and saw me standing against the door, he screamed and dropped the whole plate to the ground. Lu Like Yen ran out in panic, but when she saw me, her face turned pale. After being silent for a while, I had to speak up. You two are having so much fun. Do you need me to avoid you? At this time, Lu Like Yen regained her senses. She instinctively took a big step back. You. Don Tom looked at me, his eyes full of unwillingness. Go home. I laughed. Why do I have to report to you when I go back to my house? As soon as my words ended, Don Ton took 2 steps back, his lips trembling. I didn't mean that. Lu Like Yen frowned. What are you talking about? I just saw him here studying, no one to take care of him. Besides, you're not at home alone, and I didn't finish eating, so I called him over to eat with me. Don't make a fuss. Looking at the woman unconsciously standing in front of Don Ton, I did not hesitate to give her a slap. Lu and Yen were stunned, perhaps she never thought I would attack her. Over her shoulder, I saw the corner of Don Ton's mouth slightly raised, his eyes looking at me provocatively. I laughed coldly under the eyes of 2 people. I held the pen on the table, stroke by stroke, each heavy stroke, writing the missing strokes on the old poster. Just those last 2 strokes mean that the day after tomorrow I will leave this place, never having to see the 2 people who disgust me again. When Don Ton left, Lu Like Yen looked at the words I had written. She just felt strange but couldn't say why. She just felt so conflicted, her instincts made her turn to me. Phuong Nguyen. I turned to look at her without emotion. What is up? Lu and Yen hesitated. You and A. Ton really have nothing. I don't want to say anything more, just pick up chopsticks to eat rice. Seeing that, she also remained silent. After dinner, when I was packing up things from my grandmother's house, she suddenly spoke up. Phuong Nguyen, hey, why are there less things in your room? So I saw you previously prepared a lot of things for the wedding. Seeing that I didn't say anything, Lu Laikyan seemed a little panicked. I think since we've submitted the marriage certificate, we can now slowly start decorating the room. I saw you bought door stickers and patterns. Give me those so I can stick them up. I smiled faintly. What should I paste? If you want to paste it, go get it from my cousin's place. But to avoid arguing with her, I can only say, it's still early, let's figure it out in a few days. Hearing me say that, Lu Laikyan thought that this was over and she breathed a sigh of relief. The next morning, Lu Laikyan suddenly finished cooking breakfast. After eating, she didn't go out. I didn't pay attention to her, just picked up the pen on the table and seriously wrote another line on the poster. Great, only one day left. Tomorrow morning, I can leave this place. Looking at me carefully taking notes, Lu Nuyen smiled and said, don't worry, the marriage certificate will probably be approved quickly. I didn't look at her, just continued to clean up the dishes. Why haven't you gone anywhere today? Lu Laikyan smiled at me. I think we're about to get married. Let's go buy some clothes. My hand stopped for a moment, her words reminded me. I'm about to go to school. I really need to buy some new clothes for my new life. I went back to my room to get the money. Seeing that I did not refuse, Lu Yen reflexively breathed a sigh of relief. But in the end, we couldn't buy any clothes, because as soon as we left the door, we saw Don Tom leaning against the wall. He looked like he had been waiting all night. Lu Laikyan panicked and ran to push him. Don Tom opened his eyes and saw us going out together. He instinctively stood up and looked at me. Mr. Fuang Nguyen, sorry, yesterday I... Don Tom frowned at me, then suddenly closed his eyes and fell toward Lu Laikyan. Seeing that, Lu Yen's face immediately changed. She caught him, shook him vigorously, and I quietly bent down, emphasizing Don Tom's common acupuncture point. Don Tom trembled slightly at this time, but tried to endure it. Without waking up, I really had to admire Don Tom's patience. Seeing that I was about to press, Lu Nuyen immediately stopped a bit and avoided my hand. He was malnourished and anemic, so I took him to the hospital. Lu Laikyan said while helping Don Tom, without turning back but running out. I didn't rush to close the door and leisurely followed her to the hospital. I looked at Lu as Yan said a few words to the doctor, then saw her standing worriedly next to the hospital bed. When I walked over, she turned around and saw me, immediately stunned. In a moment, why did you come here? I looked intently at the person lying on the bed. Actually, Don Tom is not a handsome man. Furthermore, because of malnutrition, he looked thin and somewhat austere. After that, I raised my head to look at Lu Laikyan. Maybe this style is her style. Being stared at by me, Lu Laikyan unconsciously avoided my eyes. I looked at the two of them and said coldly, the day I submitted the marriage certificate, he jumped into the river. As soon as I said this, not only did the people on the bed tremble, but also Lu Laikyan suddenly stood up, causing the chair behind her to fall to the ground. She reflexively said, "What?" I continued, "I gave him the rice that was originally used to buy our wedding clothes. I said it was a waste to use it for you. If I gave him rice, he could live for half a year. I even brought him home during the few days you were away." Lu Laikyan heard that and moved her lips. I raised my hand to stop her from leaving, said, then turned my head to look at Don Tom lying on the bed. He's clearly pretending, but you're still willing to stay here with him all night. I don't believe that someone like Lu and Yen wouldn't realize the pretense, but it's just that both sides have feelings. If you don't want to get married, you can annul the marriage, but you can't treat me so badly. I coldly looked at both of them again and said, Hearing me talk about canceling the marriage, Lu Like-yen panicked. "I'm not canceling the engagement," she glanced at the man on the bed, who was still pretending to be asleep. What a person who was good at endurance, but it was because of this ability to endure that he was able to capture Lu Like-yen in his previous life. Lu Like-yen continued, "I just pity him. There's no one in his family, he doesn't even have enough rice to eat. I just thought if I could help, I would lend a hand. We are all compatriots, so we should help each other." Her voice was a bit loud, as if she wanted to convince herself. At the same time, I saw tears in the corner of Dontan's eyes on the bed. I shook my head and said, "Okay, it's up to you. I'll go first." I walked to the door and heard Lu Like-yen's voice from behind, "Go ahead first. I'll be back in a moment." Of course, I didn't take her words to heart. I went to buy 2 new sets of clothes, then especially waited for my parents to get off work, so I went out to eat a delicious meal with them. It was late at night when I returned to my residence. In the house, everything that needed to be cleaned was done, and the items that needed to be put away were also put away. But by 11 p.m., Lu Like-yen still hadn't returned. "I have finished writing the denunciation letter sent to Dontan's school. Consider this a thank you for staying by my bedside for a few days in my previous life." As for Lu and Yen, because of the feelings of both families, I can only endure. But an annulment is certain. I recorded everything between her and Dontan, the same night I sent the letter. I think my mother will receive the letter tomorrow at the earliest. The next morning, after washing my face, I stood in front of the old poster, carefully added the final touch, then pulled my luggage and, without looking back, left this place. On the train, it took me half a day to buy a seat. Looking at the bustling stream of people at the station, I know that everyone here is starting a new journey, and so am I. The main story has ended here. Next is the side story about Lu Like-yen. Fuang Guin just disappeared from my life. The furniture in the house was gone. He didn't even leave a note. If yes, just the 2 main words on the poster in the house. Only now do I understand that was not the day he recorded the submission of the marriage certificate, but the day he was leaving. Later I learned that from the day I submitted the marriage certificate, Fuang Guin took the certificate back, and even the dowry that my family gave him, he kept it carefully in the house. 3 days later, his parents came to our house with my parents, and that's when I learned the truth. It turned out that Fuang Guin paid such attention to Dontan. But why couldn't he give me one last chance? Fuang Guin said he pretended to be sick. How could I not know that? So I thought, when he leaves the hospital this time, I will definitely not have to deal with him anymore. I won't let him be sad because of Dontan, but Fuang Guin didn't give me that chance and definitely left me. I begged his parents not to cancel the marriage. I will definitely change Fuang Guin's decision, but his parents just shook their heads and looked at me with disappointed eyes. At this time, I sat absent-mindedly in the room where he used to live, where his silhouette used to be. I unconsciously opened the drawer where he usually kept his things, but discovered that everything was gone. At this point I collapsed to the ground. It turns out, he was already thinking about leaving me. Then, Dontan suddenly came. He said he was reported and then expelled from school. I looked at him quietly, not saying anything. He asked me again, "Can you help him? Can you temporarily let him stay?" I heard that and quietly pushed him out. How is that possible? Fuang Guin left because of him. If I still have any connection with him, Fuang Guin and I will never have a chance in this life. Dontan was not satisfied. He knew Fuang Guin was gone, so he started clinging to me. But very soon after that, I was transferred. Fuang Guin is no longer here. There is no point in me staying. I still remember, when I was young, my parents took me to a family's house as guests. There's a boy younger than me who always clings to me, likes to follow my back, listen to stories, and also likes to pick bunches of wildflowers and give them to me. Later, when I grew up, a matchmaker wanted to introduce a person to me. Actually, I didn't think much about it, but when I heard the name of the person introduced, I agreed without understanding why. After that, we fell in love smoothly. He became my fiancé. But now, everything has become nothing. After being transferred to the South, I wrote to him, but I did not receive any response. I used to secretly visit him. Now, he is taller, more mature, and there are a few close friends next to him, but I don't dare let him see me. Later, when Phuong Nguyen was about to graduate from university, I secretly bought a house. I thought, if he agrees to forgive me, I won't hesitate to propose to him. I waited for a long time, brought a bouquet of roses and went to Phuong Nguyen. But what I saw then was that another person was standing next to him. I later heard that he got married right after graduating. His wife gave birth to a daughter. I also heard that he made a lot of money by playing stocks. As for me, life just passes by in waste. While dying, I seem to see another life of mine. I see myself and Phuong Nguyen getting married, see us having a child. But I also saw Don Tan. Seeing that I was middle-aged, I was finally moved by him and tacitly agreed to let him adopt a child. That child called me mother, and he continued to stay with me. I also saw him standing next to Phuong Nguyen's hospital bed, saying those evil words. I raised my hand to stop it, but I couldn't stop it. With a beeping sound, I suddenly woke up. With a foggy mind, he saw Phuong Nguyen coming out of the secretary's office. The paper in his hand was thrown into the trash. My heart ached. I hurriedly chased after him. I think I can definitely change this life. The beeping sound continued to echo. End of story.